Welcome to everyone out there, all of our voice friends. I'm Liz Johnson-Schaefer, and this is Dr. Ingo Titze, and today we're here talking about voice matters. Dr. Titze is the author of this wonderful textbook called Principles of Voice Production, as well as co-author of this book here, Vocology, with P. Bernally Abbott. And Dr. Titze is also the director of the National Center for Voice and Speech at the University of Utah, and also holds an academic position at the University of Iowa and the Communications Disorders Department. Is that correct?
Yes, and the School of Music.
And the School of Music. So welcome, Dr. Titze. Thank you for being here today.
It's a pleasure. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. I wanted to start out and ask you a little bit about how you got started in your profession.
Well, I walked sort of two parallel paths for a long, long time in my life. I grew up in post-World War II Germany, when there wasn't much available for entertainment anywhere, and we basically did all of our entertaining in the home, and most of that was singing. And I was introduced to classical singing through the radio. And my older brother, who fed me pretty much everything from Schubert to Verdi on a regular basis. And but my father decided that Germany was at that time not the place for us to have our best opportunities. So we became immigrants and came to the United States in 1955. I was just 13 years old at the time. And he encouraged me to go into the sciences because he felt like that would be a good future. And I had inclinations towards, objects and, taking clocks apart like kids do and radios and so forth. And but my mother always wanted me to sing with her and for her. And so I could never make a decision, and I still haven't made that decision as to which field I really like. And so what I do is both of them. And I found that the sciences that I learned, the physics and engineering, served me very well towards studying the human voice. And that's become my passion, and that's my path.
Okay. So at what point in time did you put those two things together and realize that you could start to understand the voice from a scientific perspective?
There was a very key point in that, and that was when I was a missionary in Seattle, Washington, and a call conductor by the name of Leonard Moore gave me personal voice lessons for free because I was a missionary and I couldn't afford them. And so he says, come over on Mondays, whatever your day off is, and I'll give you voice lessons. And so I started to train my voice. And the problem was that with every exercise he gave me, I could never get away from asking myself, well, why are we doing this? And what does it do to the instrument? And what do I gain with this exercise? And he tried to explain it to me over and over again. And I could never get the depth of the answer I wanted. So at the time, I then knew that I had to go in this direction and really do some discovery, because I felt like the people who were most wanting to explain all of this didn't have the language for it and didn't have the science behind it. So then I went back to school after my mission and got a PhD in physics, and particularly in acoustics. So then I started to study nothing but the human voice, and that put me on this path.
So at the time that you started studying the physics of the voice, who did you go to for mentorship and guidance? Because, I'm still having a hard time finding people who understand things. They're not real prevalent. At the time that you were studying it, since you're a pioneer in the field, there must have been very little to go on. How did you begin that process?
Well, I was very lucky because the school I chose, Brigham Young University, for my studies, was just blessed with having Harvey Fletcher as an emeritus professor. He was the one that is credited with starting stereophonic sound and inventing it at Bell Telephone Laboratories in New Jersey.
Wow.
And he was basically done with his long-term appointment there at Bell Labs, and he came to BYU and wanted to just in retirement write a few more papers. And then he brought on a young person from MIT, Bill Strong, who became my real mentor. But I was down there with these two gentlemen, down there meaning in the basement, basically, and next to their offices. And I had lots of wonderful discussions. And Harvey Fletcher was the person who really understood the combination between the larynx and the ear and how voicing and hearing go together. Something, by the way, I wish we would still be doing now in the voice field is to ally ourselves much more with the hearing people, because I think we're much closer to them than we are to the language people.
Right, because it's just the opposite mechanism like you talked about, correct?
Yeah, it's just all the transduction system in reverse order. But everything, that we receive and perceive is just the reverse of how we produce it in many ways.
Wow. So what was your first either research experiment or research project around voice that kind of got you started on your path?
I wanted to make a computer model of sound production, voice production. So I knew that is what I had to do, and that's been ongoing for my entire life now. And not a day goes by where I don't pick up my simulator and improve something in it. And by the way, I'm trying to make this now available to many people, the membership of the Pan American Vocology Association, as a tool that they can work with both in the studio and in the clinic. That's been my dream, is to have a tool much like, from the outside in, we look at sound spectrogram as being sort of the classic tool that everybody looks at.
Mm-hmm.
But from inside out, starting with sort of the physiology and then producing the sound, that is not really very much available. And that is what I want my final product to be, and make it available to as many people as I can.
How would that work?
Well, we basically begin with modeling someone's anatomy, basically the head and neck airway anatomy. And then we write all the laws of physics of how air moves and how tissues vibrate and move, and how acoustic waves go back and forth and how they radiate from the mouth. All of that can be done by just writing equations of physics. And out comes the sound. That's, of course, what we did with Pavarotti years ago. That was the first demonstration of that.
So we talked about this earlier before the interview started, but Pavarotti's back there in the hallway there.
There's a tiny little monitor there on, I guess it's the right side or the left side where you're looking. I guess the left side. Yeah, that's still the head of our robot that sang Nessun Dorma from Turandot.
When was Pavarotti born?
Well, the first concert we gave was about 1992, thereabouts. And I gave a first concert at the University of Iowa in one of their main concert halls. And then we quickly had another concert with Pavarotti in Denver at the Fletcher Concert Hall, which is where the Denver Symphony plays. But it was the Acoustical Society of America who came there and had their semi-annual meeting. And so we used that main concert facility and built a show around Pavarotti.
That's wonderful. And so just to clarify for the folks out there that don't know, Pavarotti's voice is 100% computer simulated. So it's not a model of anybody's voice sampled. It's completely, it's all equations and math, right?
Exactly. That is the direction we've always gone. A lot of good singing simulation or synthesis can now be produced by taking sort of pieces of natural sound and then modifying them and tying them back together. But we didn't do that. We took no sound from Luciano Pavarotti or any other tenor for that matter. We just estimated sort of what his anatomy would be and mouth shapes would be, And of course, we went to the sheet music to find out, the duration and the pitches and so forth. But everything else was just written in as laws of physics and executed serially over time.
Are you the first person that you know of that's done something like this?
Well, the first simulation that really mattered was done at Bell Laboratories under the direction of Jim Flanagan.
Okay.
And he produced the two-mass model of the vocal folds, as they called it at the time. That was something like 1.5 years ahead of me, because I did my dissertation in that, and it took me a while to get the dissertation done and get it published. And so I was not the first, but I was the second.
Okay.
In that series, yes.
Okay. So I want to go back to what you were talking about in terms of your dream and creating this well, what would you call it that we're talking about? Is it a program that you're wanting to develop, or is it something else?
Well, the best way to describe it is a simulator. Okay. Basically, what we want to do is give the people the opportunity, when they have either a patient, a client, or a student, is to get the simulator to approximate what that person's voice is as closely as possible.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's a big task, because it really requires putting them in the MRI machine and getting a scan of their airway and all the detail we can. And then once we have established sort of this is a clone, if you will, of you vocally, then we can say, now what could happen to your voice if we change this or change this or change that. Uh-huh. So I see it as a look ahead, basically, for training and for habilitation or rehabilitation. Your voice is at this state right now. If we were to change this is what it would sound like. If we put a more vibrato or less vibrato, or we put a ring into it, or we color it in different ways. And so that would give then the person who is guiding this individual in their progress a way of thinking, well, maybe we can't reach this kind of a sound, but we can certainly reach that kind of a sound. These are the plateaus that are likely to be achieved. And that would be nice. I think the person would say, right now, when you train someone, they never know quite what the likelihood is, in terms of changing their sound in any major way. But this way you could make a prediction, at least, of where they could end up.
And it's so important for a singer to have a vocal model to go for. Like when we're learning how to sing a certain style or a certain sound, we have to listen to other singers to have that model of what we could potentially be, might help us get there faster and make things clearer and more understandable.
Yeah. And this is all of these things, the technology that we have now, I think is helpful because people are no longer willing to wait 10, 15 years to find out if they have a career in this venue or some other one. People want to know, am I likely to succeed? And they want to know it in 2 years or so. And so training voices and habilitating voices, as we call it, is over a much shorter time frame right now. And that's why we need the technology to help out.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. That's wonderful. I cannot wait to see what comes of all of that and to have those tools, because I think adding technology to the vocal studio is something that we all want to know more about. Anything to help our singers to get better in a more scientific way or a more concrete way is helpful. Like kind of what got me on this path was seeing my voice on a spectrogram for the first time. I had no idea what I was looking at, but I knew that there was information there, and based on that information, I could do something differently instead of just kind of wondering and guessing what was going on. Exactly.
I mean, we hear harmonics, basically, the whole string of them, and to see them for the first time right in front of you in real time, I mean, that's amazing.
It is.
And likewise, I think we can do with this inside-out approach to see the vocal tract changing from vowel to vowel or into a consonant, and immediately then hear the sound that goes with it and how you can make it differently and get a different sound. I think this is all very exciting for the future.
It's kind of like an instrumentalist is able to see their instrument on the outside of their body, so we can talk about, you know, where things are placed and the configuration of the strings or the keys or your fingers on the keyboard. You're going to be able to do that with the voice soon, to be able to see what's actually going on, so you can make approximations and judgments based on what's really happening versus what you guess would be happening.
Well, and it's so important for the vocal instrument because, like you say, anybody that plays a string or a brass instrument holds this thing in their hand,
right,
and they can see all the pieces of it. Most people on the street don't even know whether your vocal folds are up or down or sideways. I mean, they have never seen them. They have no
right.
clue what is there. They don't realize that whole vocal fold is no longer than the fingernail. And yet, with an instrument that size, with a string that small, we can stand next to a piano and compete with the whole 88 keys on the piano with strings that are of 2 meters long in some cases almost. So it's amazing, and to show that to people and give them appreciation for it, that alone is worth it. Never mind helping them to develop, but just to give them the information about it.
Right, exactly. See, that's why this field is so exciting, is because the voice is it's a great mystery, and it's beautiful, and it's spiritual, and it's musical, and it's expressive. It's all these things, and we know so very little about it, that I guess that's why I want to do these interviews, is because I want to talk to people who are thinking about these things and share your stories and your ideas with the world, so that more people can get excited. What I'm hoping is that some researcher down the line, like some 6-year-old kid right now today, is going to see this, and he's going to start thinking, what about this? What about that? And kind of pick up and take it to places that we can't even possibly imagine at this point. You know what I mean?
Exactly. You know, there's certain fascinations about the voice that I think that everybody needs to know about, that at least they fascinated me. One is, why did nature put our sound instrument in the neck? With the most confined and constricted area of our body, and all of the lifelines go through and around, either through the larynx or around the larynx. I mean, the air goes through it, and the blood main vessels go around it. The nervous system and the spine is behind it. And you say to yourself, that is the place where we put a sound instrument, where we want to have some, big sounding board or a long tube, and none of that is available. But nature had something else in mind, and that is that when we express ourselves vocally, and you mentioned it, we express our entire personality, we express our mood, we express, our heritage even, and our upbringing, and everything that we are is in some way coded in our voice. Why? Because all of those lifelines that control us, and we control our movements with them, they have a little path right past the larynx, and they leave a little footprint on the voice. And that's why the instrument is just so amazing and so beautiful, is because all of that's encoded. And I'm so sorry that people are going more and more into texting. I mean, texting is nice. It's a quick way to get things from one person to the other, but it doesn't have all those, what we call paralinguistic features in it that tell you something about the individual, and not the individual anytime, but right now, at this moment. What's their state of health? What's their mood? Can I trust them? Can I believe them? All of this is encoded in voice. Right.
And I think the texting thing will probably always be prevalent. However, we're getting more and more in technology is becoming more and more available, so that we're getting more audio and video happening, right? So anybody can make a little tiny video and post it on Facebook immediately, or Instagram or Snapchat. So I would imagine that voice is going to become more of an issue as technology catches up with us as human beings. So that may change over time, I would imagine. Or it already is, really, because, think about what we're doing today. I'm sitting here in Nashville, Tennessee. You are in Salt Lake City, Utah. We hook up our cameras. We have a conversation. Everything is just instant. We'll put this up on the internet. It like 5 years ago, this would have been a much more difficult task,
Yeah, you're right. As long as we keep that voice well,
right.
well exercised. And one of my recent trains of investigation has been to exercise the larynx more in its high pitch and high volume state. So much of our speaking crowds everything down into sort of one area. Your viewers might not know what a voice range profile is, but what we do is in the clinic and in the studio, we chart all the pitches that a person can produce and the loudness range that they can produce on every one of those pitches. And usually it's a wide range that they can produce. They can squeal, they can yell, they can coo, and all of those things that children do when they first vocalize. But then we speak, and what we use out of that whole range gets ever smaller and smaller. And so we don't exercise that larynx very well anymore, many of us. This is why we have come up with the semi-occluded vocal tract techniques and the straw phonation, is because that allows you to glide up in pitches, as high as you can go without hurting yourself, without making it into a scream. But it does exercise that larynx so well. So that's a theme that we're on right now, big time, is how to have people at all ages, and it applies also to very advanced ages. People 80, 90, they still want to sing in a community choir or a church choir, and oftentimes they can't get any more than 4 or 5 pitch range, and they say, why does my voice break up all the time, and why can't I control it? Well, it's because they haven't used it in that range up there. So we're developing all the techniques to be able to do that.
Well, that brings me to my next question, which is, what is your very favorite vocal exercise?
Well, I have to say it's a pitch glide with a semi-occluded vocal tract. So either a straw, not sure I could run off and get one, but anyway, or a lip trill, for example. Anything that semi-occludes or almost occludes the mouth or the lips, and then it allows the sound to come back towards the larynx. And if you use the right exercise, then it will help the vocal folds in their vibration. Because most people don't know that 90% of the sound that's created here never makes it out the mouth. Most of it just rebounds back and forth and stays inside. And then the question is, if it stays inside and just bounces back and forth, how do you use it to your advantage? And so we've developed the exercises that make the best use of the sound that stays inside and helps the vocal folds to be well maintained.
Okay, so how do you help people to, like, let's say someone isn't comfortable going up higher in their range, how do you help them to relax so that they can have some higher pitches and glide around up there? Have you ever worked on that with anyone?
Well, usually when they do the semi-occlusion exercises, they find that it's not hard to go to those pitches.
Okay.
At first they feel, oh my gosh, if I bottle up my whole vocal tract and the sound doesn't come out, that's going to make me stiff and tense. But within a few minutes, they find out that's not the case.
Right.
If they make the sound through the straw and allow it to happen in a normal way, of course you have to support it just like you would if you had your mouth open. They'll find that quickly they can just glide up to those pitches and no problem.
Okay, so what about for someone who has vocal compromise, or their vocal folds are not functioning as well as they would like at the very top of their range? Have you ever seen the straw help people kind of move past some of the limitations they have on the upper end?
Well, yeah, very much so. My daughter Karen is in the clinic all day long, and she that's her job, is basically help people who have somewhat compromised conditions in the larynx. And she uses these techniques all the time, and it's very, very helpful to loosen up. That's the thing that seems so strange, and sometimes our intuitions fool us a little bit. You'd think that because you're closing off your lips and you're not letting the sound out, that has got to make me stiff, tight, and whatever else. But exactly the opposite happens. If you use that energy that's acoustically created and let it feed back to the vocal folds. Even if they're not in perfect state, they will figure out an easier way to vibrate. And that's the whole idea behind the thing.
Okay, wonderful. So another question I have is about the word vocology. The way I've heard you explain it is that vocology is to voice science what audiology is to hearing science. I think that's the best, simplest, most straightforward way of saying it. Where did that word come from?
Well, I made it up.
Okay.
That's where it comes from. Actually, I don't take 100% credit for it, because in my book, in the very first page, I say that this was the discussion that I had with a medical doctor. I believe it was in San Francisco at some time over lunch, and we were thinking, is there a simple word that would describe just the study of vocalization? And we thought that, well, anytime you end something in ology or logy, that is the Latin for study. And so then it didn't take much effort to say, well, what if we put voco in front of it? That would then be the study of voice, vocology. Right. And then we defined it in two different ways. In a very large sense, vocology would be just simply the study of vocalization. But for clinical applications, we call it the science and practice of voice habilitation. Very important to call it habilitation, because we're not just interested in getting a voice back to where it once was. That would be rehabilitation. But we want to train it to whatever task is necessary, and that may be beyond what normal conversation would be. Okay,
thank you for that explanation, because I've had several people lately ask me, habilitation, what does that mean? Why is that important? So we're not rehabilitating the voice, we're habilitating the voice to take it beyond where it might have gone before.
Yeah, to take it to places that it's never been. That's what habilitation is, letting the voice develop to do something that it hasn't done before. Rehabilitation would mean, yeah, I once was able to do that, but now I've had a problem with my voice, and now I want to get it back to where I once was. Here with habilitation, we're saying, let's let you allow your voice to do something that it's never done before. Maybe it's public speaking, maybe it's singing, maybe it's cheerleading, or whatever else it might be.
Right, right. I would love to know what your favorite voice recovery story is, either in yourself or somebody else that you know who's recovered from something and had a great breakthrough, because I think it's important that people who are in vocal distress know that there is help out there and that things can get better. And sometimes that's getting a story of hope is really important for that. Can you think of a story in terms of vocal recovery or habilitation that has caught your attention?
Well, I don't work in the clinic very much, so I don't have too many anecdotes to tell about that. But the one that comes to mind right away was a Mexican singer who was a pop singer, and he came up to Salt Lake City to get some help, and he came to my office just to talk about the straw technique, because he had heard about it. So he began to use it, and his voice really cleared up very well. He was so happy. He was doing it all day long. And so what I had to do with him is I had to back him off. I had to say, look, you only need to do this about 3 minutes at a time, and only like 3 or 4 times a day. And the rest of the time, just forget it. He was walking up and down the street doing straw phonation. He was doing it at lunchtime and everywhere while he was reading and stuff. I said, you're way, way overdoing this. It's an exercise that does make the correction that you're looking for. It makes your voice easier, less fatiguing, but just do it a few minutes and forget about it. So anyway, that was my one of my sort of cute little experiences with an individual that had a lot of struggle, but was so successful that we had to work him back in the other direction.
Right. And recently at the PAVA conference this last October, you got a chance to interview Renee Fleming. And I wanted to ask you what you took away from that interview with her. What did you learn from that?
What I took away from that was that here's a singer, Renee Fleming, who is probably the icon of sopranos today, who has a great desire to give back. She told her story about how she grew up in a very musically based home where singing went on all day. Your father and mother both were singing teachers, one in school and one in a private studio, and also at college level. But Renee Fleming really appreciated all of the help that she got from so many people, the high school teachers, the college teachers, and later her teacher in New York and others, that she had this tremendous urge to give back. And when I asked her, would you be willing to make yourself available as a subject for some scientific investigations? She didn't hesitate one moment. She says, yeah, let me know what you want me to do. And I said, would you be willing to get in an MRI machine and we can scan your whole tract? And said, well, if you allow me to stand up, I'll do it. Lying down, I'm not so sure.
Right.
But, anyway, the point being that here's an individual that is so much about the beauty of the voice and the art, that she's at a stage right now where she wants to give back in a major way. And we who have the ability to interact with her, and I should mention her sister, Rochelle, who is really the go-between in a major way. Those two women are just wonderful. And I hope we can develop something together that will benefit the world. That's
what I'm hoping too. That was a beautiful talk. It was wonderful to see the two sisters together and to have her talk about straw and to be so warm and open and just, like you said, giving back to the community. I think that's what I'm hoping for this whole field, is that we can all share information and start to break down some of the barriers of misunderstanding and really help each other from our hearts, you know, and be able to give hope to people who don't know how to deal with their voices, because I think there's a lot of outreach that still needs to be done. And part of the reason that I want to do these interviews is to just start to introduce you and other folks to the world, or at least give more access to who you are. And I think that's what Renee did too. That's what I hear you saying as well. So that was a lovely thing. And I'm glad you said what you said. That's wonderful. It kind of brings me to my next idea, which is, what do you see for the future of voice science? How do you see this helping either, you know, singers and performers or voice users of all type? Is this a health issue? What are your kind of dreams for where the field is headed?
Well, the first thing that I see happening is that the science, even though it's designed to present facts mainly and give information, I think its greater value is it's bringing together people from different camps of voice training that were very suspicious of each other and hardly talked to each other before. Because now they can both say, well, science helps me figure out what I do, but it helps me figure out what the other person does, and maybe we have more in common than we ever thought. Right. And so the communication between disciplines, and I'm talking about people who teach not just in universities, but they teach in private studios, and they teach young people, you know, in high schools and so forth. A lot of them haven't been getting the information that they need, because a lot of the information is developed in the higher circles and in university ranks, and it's always distributed in journals that not everybody can have access to. And so I think what's happening is science has become kind of a tool for just getting people together and getting to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And that was the big dream of Wilbur James Gould. And not everybody knows him anymore, but I learned all of that from him. I walked around with him to various clients and to various meetings, just learning from a man who had the vision of saying that there is nothing that should keep us apart, and no one rules anybody else. MDs aren't any more important than singing teachers are, or voice scientists are, or people who teach acting voice on the stage. We're all in the same business, and that is to understand this instrument and bring out the beauty of it. So, the future of science is going to be developed mainly by having more access with imaging to what goes on inside the body. And once we have ever more access, we will develop better theories and we will explain things better. But like I say, I think the bigger impact is this becoming a medium where everybody can feed into and take out of.
Right. I totally agree. I think it's this wonderful new frontier that we're all entering together, and I love to hear that you're so inclusive. That's been really important to me, and I hope other people really hear that message. So what advice would you give to an 18-year-old who is like entering college or interested in voice science? Where would you tell them to look and get involved if they're interested in voice science?
Well, they need to sing. They need to sing together. I would love to see a campaign that starts bringing singing back into family activity early on and school activity. What you're seeing is kind of the opposite now, as the schools are having a hard time making their budgets. They're cutting out oftentimes vocal activities such as choruses and productions on stage and so forth in favor of other topics, which of course are also important. But I use the analogy of baseball and Little League baseball. The people who go to baseball games, I would say 80 to 90% are the people who played Little League baseball. And so it's like that in singing. If you grow up singing together in duets, in trios, in groups, whatever, and you have fun making music, then you will appreciate later, and you'll go to the concert and you support those who need, to earn a salary with it. So I think we need this campaign, less just passively listening, but more doing it yourself. And you can't wait until high school when you first get. I saw a high school production of Les Mis just 2 days ago, and it was beautifully done. But believe it or not, there were several main characters in it who claimed they had never sung before. They were cast because they looked good, they acted well, they could portray the character. But they say, in my home, we don't sing, Wow. And that's so sad. So again, back to the experiences of Renee Fleming and her home. There was music and vocal music all day long in that house. And that's what we have to foster and tell our youngsters, if, they all think that careers are made just by, having a good luck on American Idol or The Voice or something like that. You just happen to be in the right place at the right time. But they don't understand that the training behind it is necessary, but it's also fun. It's just a lot of fun to learn, even if it takes 100 times through a song before you finally get it. But that repeating and enjoying the rehearsal of it, the practice, that's more fun than even oftentimes giving the final concert. And you know this because I've sung with you. I know how much fun it is for you to express a jazz piece or any kind of a piece.
That's true. I was not expecting that answer, but that's exactly right. We need to sing more and we need to express our voices and explore our own instruments, because there's no voice that's ever going to sound like you ever in the history of humanity. You're put together the way you are, and that's really important and special. And anyway, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, but it's important because exploring your instrument is giving a gift to the world and also helping you to understand what voice is. Yeah. So anyway, I digress. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. And I am excited to offer this testimony for the world about voice. And I'm hoping that this will spark some interest for someone somewhere in the future on voice matters, and get them interested in your work and other people's work. And so I hope that we can meet with you again sometime in the near future. If there's more to, as I come up with more questions and there's more to talk about, I hope you would be willing to interview again. But thank you for your time today.
Well, let me just say, God bless you, Liz, for doing this.
Thank you very much. And I just so appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Okay.